Lesson planning is one of the most vital elements of the job of teaching. It is estimated that most teachers spend 10 to 20% of their working time planning. This can reduce uncertainty and improve classroom outcomes. Think of a time in your life when something was well planned versus a time that was poorly planned. Most likely, the planned event encountered less problems than the unplanned one. The same is true with planning to teach. So what does effective teacher planning actually look like? In this video, we will discuss how teachers decide the following through planning: what to teach, what the objective is, and how daily and unit plans fit together. These plans are usually done by individual teachers, but sometimes it can be beneficial to collaborate with others who teach the same content or students. Another aspect of teacher planning is that which occurs in the moment in response to classroom occurrences. There are two basic schools of thought when it comes to planning: the rational linear model and the nonlinear model. In the rational linear model, planning starts with goals, after which the teacher plans actions to achieve those goals, and finishes with designing a way to measure if goals were met, like a test. In contrast, the nonlinear model begins with planning the actions that a student must complete, then repeatedly reflecting on how well the actions were completed in order to adjust the goals. There are merits to both of these models, and most teachers actually use a mix of both. The process of planning may look different for new teachers versus experienced teachers. A 1995 study by Hausner and Griffey concluded that new teachers tend to focus more on keeping students on task, while experienced teachers who have honed their classroom management skills are free to focus more on student outcomes from learning. The first step of any teacher planning is deciding what to teach. This is often not at the discretion of individual teachers, but is instead influenced by state and national standards, curriculum frameworks, and even community values. One example of this is social-emotional learning lessons. Not everything that is recommended by these various influences can be taught, so teachers must prioritize what is most important to teach. When planning, teachers should consider what enduring understandings and core ideas they want their students to take away and focus on those concepts. These can be summarized as two questions: what should students know, and what should students do? Lesson plans are like a roadmap, with reaching the objectives as the destination. Often, sharing student-friendly versions of this roadmap can help your students reach their destination by seeing where to go. Strong objectives should include what students will do, how learning will be shown, and how performance will be measured. It can be difficult to write learning objectives that find a balance between being so vague that students cannot decipher meaning and so rigid that it hinders student success. On a much broader scale, teachers must write lesson plans for multiple time frames, including daily lessons, weekly plans, unit plans, and broad yearly plans. While making these plans, it is important to remain flexible in case of interruptions, which are frequent in schools. Daily plans can often be more detailed and should include routines and procedures taught at the beginning of the year to save time and reduce chaos. Plans should also include differentiation for various student needs, as well as consideration of time management to maximize engagement. Research has shown that actual academic learning time, when students are actively engaged and focused, is most impactful for learning. However, this time is scarce. In an 1,100-hour school year, on average, slightly over 300 hours are devoted to actual academic learning, while the rest are lost to various other routines and distractions. In the 21st century, a shift has begun in which teachers are turning to student-centered planning, in which students are active in their own learning outcomes, while teachers act more in a facilitative capacity. In this model, students are expected to take more responsibility, and learning focuses on skill building rather than just content. This generally fosters more student involvement in the learning process. Ultimately, lesson planning is so much more than just paperwork. It is the essence of impactful teaching. Let's hear from a current teacher who has had great success collaborating with others on the planning process.
All right, so I've taught 7th and 8th grade social studies, so world history, geography, and U.S. history.
For how many years?
My 9th year.
Okay. And you said that you've had a few different student teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk through how you explain lesson planning to them?
Yeah, so usually when I get a student teacher coming in, I have them kind of just watch the process of student or lesson planning with me. Typically, when they're starting to take over classes, I have them think about like what the standards expect us to do. Um, from there, we develop like objectives, like what is it that the skills we want the students to be learning, and then from there, we think about what tasks can we do in the classroom that would help them achieve those goals that we're creating or those objectives.
Okay. Do you find that it's hard to explain like the metacognition of like how you decide which things to to do?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking through like what skills you need a student to do and the way that we're going to actually implement that teaching practice to get them to do those skills, it's one of those things that even if you know all the theories, it kind of has to be in practice. And some of them will lend themselves to working with certain teaching styles that you may have and strengths that you may have, and some lend themselves to other strengths that other people might have.
Okay. And then you do a lot of collaborative projects with other contents. Can you
Mhm.
tell me how that has looked? Some examples or some strategies?
Yeah, so when we are thinking about creating a multi-discipline project where we're crossing different types of content areas, the first thing we're trying to do is figure out what skills kind of overlap between, say, social studies, ELA, math, and science. And then from there, we have to find the content. And from there, we can then start building goals for what we're trying to do. Um, I would say the biggest problem that we run into in that is that sometimes the standards feel so specific and you have to kind of break out of that and think of like the overarching themes. Um, but usually, when you find the right group of people who are willing to kind of work through that process, it's really just kind of being able to talk through what is it that you need to accomplish with your task. So, if you're a science teacher, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. And then having that open dialogue with a social studies teacher, and then finding those bridgeways to create a cross curricular project.
So can you talk about the like Heifer project, how that linked into the four stand or was it all four classes or just three?
Um, so, our Heifer project mostly is ELA and social studies. We kind of link it through the students are learning about economic situations and realities in Africa, how resources affect the ability for people to have jobs, how colonialism impacts some of the ability for people in Africa to kind of self determine for themselves what their country might do or how they might exist. And then from there, why there's just so much poverty in sub-Saharan Africa versus the rest of the world, kind of linking those together.
Mhm.
While at the same time, in ELA, they're working on rhetorical devices, logos, ethos, pathos, and being able to convince somebody to do something by using the proper rhetorical device. Most of the time, when you make an appeal, you want to have multiple. So what we do is kind of merge those two together, where we would have students thinking about, all right, people in sub-Saharan Africa are economically disadvantaged because of these reasons. There's this organization called Heifer who provides microloans and other opportunities for those people to be able to self-determine for themselves by creating businesses, like getting people in the United States who have access to money and wealth and be able to be charitable to convince people to actually go through that charity process. So we link it by creating the thing that they're trying to convince people to do is based in a background knowledge that they've learned in another content.
Okay. That sounds like those work together really well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you.
No problem.